Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ruby AI podcast. Joe and I are here today interviewing a very special guest. You may have heard of him from such popular repositories as the Ruby LLM project. Joe, you want to say hello?
Yeah, I'm Joe Leo, co-host of the Ruby AI podcast. I'm very happy to be here with Carmine Paolino. Hey, Carmine, welcome.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
It really is. And this is going to be kind of a special episode because for Phoenix, we use Ruby LLM every day. And so I have questions prepared from my engineers who are excited that I'm interviewing you today. But I have a question first, and that is, why is the Dependabot upgrade from Ruby LLM 182 to 190 sitting in my pull request, sitting in the pull request bin for GitHub? Why are my developers afraid to upgrade right now? Is there any reason, or can they upgrade with abandon?
They can, sure. There's actually a new release today, which is 191.
This is already obsolete. Yeah. That's good. I'm going to tell them that.
About config. It's a weekly, I guess. It should be daily.
It's daily. Yeah, that's good. That's probably as good a place as any to start. I mean, over the last 6 months, 1.0, if you'll have to correct me if my timing's off here. I think 1.0 was released about 6 months ago. Is that right?
It was March 11, actually. A little bit more than 6 months.
A little more. And since then, we've had minor releases and tiny releases, and we're now up to 191. And along that same timeline, the library has grown massively in popularity. And so I'm curious to get your take. What do you think accounts for its success? And what is the commensurate amount of updating and kind of love that you've poured into the library mean over the past, let's say, 6+ months?
Right. I think the success came from the very beginning. So I didn't expect any of this, by the way. I thought this was mostly a project for myself. I built it because I wanted that kind of interface in order to build my company, which is Chat with Work. Mm-hmm. And 4 days later, someone posted it on Hacker News and it became the #1 in Hacker News. And so from like a few hundred stars that I got from me posting it on Reddit, it became 1,700 stars in like not even a week. So it definitely skyrocketed at the very beginning. And then it became a normal, steady increase in terms of popularity. I think when you do things for yourself and you're really passionate about it and you're really catering to your own needs, there may be somebody else out there that may feel the same. So I'm a true believer of building things for yourself and dog fooding. And I think that has resonated with a lot of people. So I built it for myself, and a lot of people agreed that that's a good way to do it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot of somebodies that have felt like, yeah, I need this thing too. A whole lot. Just checked right before we aired. Ruby LLM has over 3.6 million downloads. So you're leading something that is momentous in the Ruby community and really in the development community writ large.
Well, I think that's probably the philosophy that I poured into it that actually became the reason why people really communicated with it and really connected with it.
Before I let you get off onto a tangent, I'm really curious, like, what was missing from all the other gems? I know you said you liked a very particular interface. What continues to drive that interface based on all of the things that are changing with all these models that you see continuing to like grow the Ruby LLM project?
The philosophy is that I think simple things should be simple and complex things should be possible. Also, models and providers, they are commodities. So they should be able to be changed anytime. We have new models coming out any 3 days, every 3 days. And so we need to be able to change them really quickly. And we don't want to have yet another way of doing things because these providers, they have their own APIs. They want to kind of lock you into their own APIs. So I'm kind of against that. Then also convention over configuration, which we all know and love. Progressive disclosure was another tenet of my philosophy. And also, look, I'm a solopreneur, so I need to be able to build the companies that I want to build just by myself. And I don't want to spend a ton of money into the cloud. So I want to be able to make this into one machine and have like thousands of connections at the same time. So for me, the last, maybe most important tenet of this philosophy is like one API for one person in one machine. So these are the core tenets.
That's interesting. Can you talk a little bit about progressive disclosure? Because of the things that you mentioned, I think that might be the least familiar, certainly to me, maybe to others.
Right. So when you use Ruby LLM and you do ruby_LLM.chat.ask, then you have all these dot with methods.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by progressive disclosure. So first you can start with ruby_LLM.chat.ask and not even specifying a specific model. It will choose the default model. Then you can add the model name. Then maybe you want to use another provider. Maybe you want to add like some parameters that are specific for that provider. Maybe you want to add like a system prompt. So all these things you can add on top of the original call. And that makes it so much easier to understand what's going on instead of having to configure everything from scratch and be like this massive amount of code or hashes that are really ugly.
Yeah, and that definitely a huge advantage of Ruby LLM is the way that it abstracts that messiness away from the developer. But I am also curious for you, as you mentioned, a new model is released every 3 days. Some portion of the 3.6 million people that are using Ruby LLM want to use that model. So is your job just continuously configuring, the interface for a new model behind the scenes?
Fortunately not, because
Good.
right now we're already... Yes, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. So we have already 11 providers that we support. Mm-hmm. And out of these providers, some of them, they support hundreds and hundreds of models, like OpenRouter, for example, or even the local providers like GPU Stack has Hugging Face and another model repository. So in theory, we support like thousands of models. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to do work for each single model, fortunately. The thing that changes all the time is the model registry, but there's an easy way to actually refresh it. And now we support actually saving the new refreshed model registry in a different file. This is a new thing for 1.8. So hello, dev method engineers.
We're on 1.8, but we got, we need the new 1.9 features and goodies. Yeah.
Sorry, 1.9. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's new for 1.9. Then yeah. All right. We'll get on it today.
Then also we support the model-backed model registry, which was from, I believe, 1.8. Mm-hmm. And so you can actually save all of these new models that come in. I have to say the model registry was one of the first things that I wanted to have in the library that I wanted to have. And kind of the fundamental reason why I made all this. So you can see it by, for example, having ruby_LLM.chat without even specifying a model, or just by specifying a model, it will actually know which provider it is. And so it would give you the access to that provider instead of you have to remember which model is from which provider.
That was one thing I really liked about OpenRouter. It was one of the first, I think, to have this like provider concept. It's funny because I tried to work with Andre on the LangChain RB project to get a provider kind of domain set up. It's hard when you already have an established gem to do some kind of core reworking like this. Mm-hmm. It had some advantage there in that you already knew what was missing. I knew what to build first. I'm curious, like, how does the provider mechanisms work? Like, is it easy or straightforward to set up this kind of like setup? Like, what challenges have you kind of experienced trying to manage all of these different APIs?
It's not super challenging. I think right now it may become a little bit more challenging with the responses API because it's a completely different concept. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't looked into that deeply, but they store the entire conversations themselves. This is fundamentally different from how we do things in Ruby LLM. So I had the concept of we store the conversation ourselves and we send it all at the same time. It's not that hard to just send the last message though. So also not that big of a problem. I think the most challenging thing is actually to support every little thing that the providers add that is slightly different. And maybe the most challenging thing of all was to actually implement Anthropic prompt caching. So every other provider kind of does prompt caching by themselves automatically, right? You don't even have to set it up. It's great. Anthropic decided that you should have the full control about which messages they get cached, and they have a whole book of a page that you can read about like when happens what, and it's crazy. And I didn't want to have a whole set of hooks and methods and things just for that specific quirk. So it was quite the challenge. There's been a few PRs that wanted to address that, and they fundamentally changed a lot of things in the library. So I was like, I'm not so sure about this. What if they decide that this is a wrong idea at some point and they change it? Mm-hmm. And then we're stuck with all this mess of code to rewrite again. So I decided to go a little bit deeper and basically give the users the possibility to attach raw content. Because in order to do, correct me if I'm jumping too deep into details here, but basically for Anthropic prompt caching, you need to specify certain things like the cache, control, ephemeral, and then also for how long you want it inside the block of the content. So you have type text, and then the content, and you have to specify in that same block. So I had to give access to the users to that block. And so I invented the concept of raw content blocks, which is, I believe it was 1.9 also.
All right. So still, that's not been in production for very long. So probably jury's still out on how effective it'll be. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're trying to make the design decision that makes the smallest amount of impact to the overall library, because you're really just supporting one provider, one very important provider, but one provider nonetheless.
Yeah. So in general, I think that's the challenge, is to not completely like mess up the whole library just for little quirks of little providers. And so sometimes you need to sit for a little while with the ideas and think deeply, and then something comes up. That
you make kind of a great point in that Anthropic even has their whole like access to thinking, where you can add thinking blocks. So I guess that's where I wonder about the complexity within like Ruby LLM, like managing all the APIs, right? The responses API comes with a whole bunch of new things that you can't do in other model providers. How are you looking at this landscape of like, now that it's beyond just like everybody uses OpenAI's APIs, now that the use cases are getting more advanced, what are your plans like longer term for like supporting these diverging APIs?
I look at the common denominator. So for example, thinking is going to be something that we're going to look at pretty soon, because a lot of providers now have thinking, and to support it in a very straightforward, clean manner, in a way that I would actually enjoy using. And we essentially have two different layers in Ruby LLM. So we have the plain old Ruby objects of Ruby LLM, in which, you know, you have all your representation of the messages, the contents of the messages, the attachments, all of that. And it's in one single format, right? It's one API. And then you have the provider translation layer, right? So the provider translation layer parses the provider responses and also renders the provider responses. Mm-hmm. So in order to support all these APIs, we need to think, what is the best way to interact with that specific concept, and then implement it inside the Ruby LLM, pure Ruby LLM part of it. And then in the provider translation layer, then we implement how to do that. So as simple as that.
Look at the wheels turning for Valentino.
There's a lot of unknown usage, I think. I really admire you and Alex Rudolph from the Ruby OpenAI Gem have a very similar philosophy in just waiting things out. And it's very impressive, especially, you know, for the popularity that your gem has gotten here. Being able to wait probably gets harder and harder. More issues, more pull requests, more people yelling at you on various channels, right? Why are you not solving this already in this particular way?
That's fine.
I know. Right. It's fine. No, it's fine. Right. You know, it's not easy though. I imagine.
No, it's not easy. That's true.
Where do you see like that turning point? Is it pretty natural at this point where you see, okay, like this now makes sense to implement? At what point do you see like, okay, let the floodgates open and just like let people implement this stuff? Or do you try and take hold of that design and decide?
I'm not sure if you guys are going to be satisfied with this answer, but it's gut feeling. Mm-hmm. So
I'm satisfied.
It clicks and it feels right.
It's honest, you know.
There's no process or analysis or Excel spreadsheet or, decision tree that I make in order to then implement something. It's just, does it feel right? And maybe we can rationalize this by saying it feels right when the API will feel right, will feel like I actually want to use this. And also the complexity is not overblown for something that should really be simple. So as I said, the first tenet of the philosophy is like simple things should be simple and complex things should be possible. So that also means that sometimes you just give escape hatches to people and be like, hey, this part you can control, but warning, you have to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of it at this point is you leading that design or getting influenced by others? Do you see more of it becoming external and just like things starting to look right based on what other people are contributing? Or is it coming from just your experience, like watching stuff grow? Do you see like one increasing over the other at this point?
I'm not sure about the future. I'm kind of against predicting the future. So I don't know in the future how it's going to be.
you lean on the LLMs for the next step.
Yeah.
That would be an even worse prediction. At the moment, I'm kind of leading the design of things. I certainly get influenced by what people do and what people think, as we all do, right? Like we're surrounded by our own environment, and it's kind of like reinforcement learning, right? So we always get influenced by whatever people are saying, whatever people are doing. But I still feel like I want to have the direction of at least the design of things for the foreseeable future. Ultimately, this is kind of like my taste implemented inside code, and it worked out so far. So let's see. It may change in the future. We will see how that goes.
That's fair.
I wanted to bring in a couple of questions from the development team. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
All right. So this one I think is relevant based on what we were just talking about. So this is from Steve. So there's been a lot of discussion about multi-agent AI assisted development lately. And he notes that Swarm recently released version 2 of their SDK, and it's built on top of Ruby LLM. And so the question for you is, what challenges and opportunities do you see with this new development paradigm?
I'm not a huge believer in multi-agent systems. You can clip that if you want.
This is going to be clipped and put into on my LinkedIn tomorrow. Go on. So please continue.
I'm with you too.
All right. Yeah, even better.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. So I've been in AI for now a long time. It's been 14 years if you count also my studies. And the more you add models on top of other models, the more you add errors. So I think that multi-agent systems, at least maybe I also haven't used them enough. That's also true. But I cannot believe that they're going to be extremely good at their output. So already I'm using Codex, right, every day. And I need to really baby it in order to get the kind of output I want. Even just a normal chat with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever needs to be babied a lot in order to get the output you want. So I think when you add like a lot of agents working in parallel, you have a little bit more accuracy because each agent is doing a specific task. But overall, you're using a lot of them. So your surface area increases. And I'm kind of skeptical that that is a viable thing right now. It may be like a great thing in the future. And it's great that people are already exploring that and doing the best out of it. I know that Kieran Klassen from Every, for example, is a big fan of that. But at the moment, I don't see this being a really good way of working. What are your thoughts on this, guys?
It's difficult to me because I both use it and fight against it at the same time. I guess I both see the benefits and the cons simultaneously, which I think is good. And I think I'm not alone in this. I think breaking things down into distinct agentic units that do very specific things is not manageable. And I commonly liken this to the whole flat organization mentality that like DHH originally like started charging for, right? Where, you know, you get a manager of one and you'll be much more effective. especially if you can like multiply that across your smaller organizations, right? And problem then becomes just a scalability. Like, how does that scale? As far as like development goes, you are just one. If you work within a team, like even at a larger organization, you're probably like 10 developers at the most if it's structured right. And so even 10 is like manageable. And so, but as it grows, it becomes less manageable, right? And I think that's even more so the truth with LLMs as contributors. And so the more that you break things apart and distribute it, the harder that becomes to manage. And then you're just managing the distribution, right? And then how do you worry about quality like as things grow too, right? And then at what point are you just like spending all your time managing all of this stuff? Maybe people want to do that versus actual coding, but like personally, I don't, right? But who knows how that'll evolve, right? Maybe like people coming out of college now, like they really don't want to program. That could be the case. I'm too far out of the educational domain to kind of know that. So like,
see, maybe I don't understand that because we program in Ruby and I love Ruby. I think it's so good to program in Ruby. Like, why would you take it from us? You know,
you know, I'm with you. And so unfortunately, they don't teach Ruby, you know, in most colleges yet. And so like, if they did, maybe people would have a different mentality. How many people want to like learn TypeScript or Rust or things like that coming out of college? Maybe they do. I don't know. But it seems like they would rather talk to an LLM based on just like talking to people, right, new to the industry. So
yeah, I'm not sure if it's so much about like the language design as it is more like we're kind of lazy as people. So I think that's fine that we're lazy, but there is still a lot to be done in the LLM space in order to have like very good code generation that doesn't skyrocket into some pile of crap.
Yeah. Speaking of that specifically then, right? That's one of my biggest cons of all of this. It's like you ask it to do something very complex. You give it a very like refined specification of all the details that you want from it. And it's going to go and like dump a ton of stuff that you then have to spend time to like look through and weed through. And like, how much of that, if you had just designed up front and like done your own rubber ducking and like done the Gary Bernhardt style of development of like testing the things that you want to do up front so you can see where the interface leads, right? All of that is lost at just like pure implementation. Boom, here you go. Boom, right? And like you have to like keep level setting as you go too, right? And be like, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. And then it's just like, it becomes this whole can of worms of trying to course correct, which if you break it down smaller, maybe isn't a bad thing.
Well, that's interesting because it sounds to me like both of you guys are describing agentic coding in general, whether or not it's multi-agent. And I'm curious to know, is that because Carmine, you mentioned at the top, okay, well, I'm using Codex every day and I really have to baby it. And I get that. And we've had people on the show already multiple times that are like, yeah, you know, maybe excited, maybe frustrated, but are like, yeah, I'm doing this thing every day. And I'm telling Codex or Claude Code to do this or do that. I'm trying to get better at it. But then where does the multi-agent thing come in? And I guess maybe definitely for me, maybe for some people listening, how does that differ from, for example, just the normal tool calling that happens whenever I ask Codex to do something for me?
Right. So in multi-agent, you would have multiple agents doing different things, and a single thing would be conducive then to the final output. Usually you would have maybe like master agent. For example, in deep research, you have a lead researcher, you know, it gives out tasks to the smaller researchers, then they do specific things. That works really well, to be honest. Like deep research is great. But at the same time, you have to think about also the accuracy of the total output. So this is, I think, what we were talking about. And yeah, it is similar to just agentic development, but it kind of skyrockets from there, it feels to me, where if there is like one wrong information, then it just gets passed along. It could be that you could use multi-agents to verify the output of things. And I think that's the right way of doing it. If you have to do multi-agent, that's probably the student teacher or, you know, researcher verifier kind of implementations. I think those are the best. But how many times do you see that versus I just have like a swarm of 100 agents and they're doing all these things for me. And suddenly like, okay, how do you even verify all that code? For me, it comes down to how many times did you enjoy in your life to edit code or to read other people's code more than you enjoyed writing your own? this is what it comes down to me. I think writing code is so much more enjoyable, so much more fun than it is to trying to figure out this crazy amount of complicated things that are interlocking between themselves that somebody else, unless it's written in Ruby and is really beautiful, then I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm curious. So you mentioned deep research being good for multi-agents. And so it makes me think like maybe there are specific tasks that are good for doing multi-agent approaches. And so I'm curious, what else do you see besides research as like a multi-agent approach being beneficial? And like what tasks have you seen it fall apart where a single agent approach is more beneficial?
I think it's all about context management, which is perhaps the most important thing that we should take care into developing an agent. So by looking at how Claude Code and Codex work, I was actually inspired to change how Chat with Work works, because they do context management really beautifully. So you have first the grep tool, the search tool, that would search things in files, and then you would only get that specific line, right? So you can search in hundreds of files and get hundreds of specific previews of these files. And then the LLM would decide which file to go and look at. So I think with multi-agent systems, what you can do is to spread across a bigger task of researching in the entire web. And then each single agent would look at one specific aspect of it, summarize it, and then give that summary back to the lead researcher or to another step in between, who knows. And at that point, you would have much more context efficient usage. And are you guys familiar with context struct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just listening to Lance Martin on Latent Space podcast, where he's talking about that. Do you want to just like refresh the audience on what that is?
So basically, even though you have models that have 1 million tokens of context, it doesn't mean that they will perform just as well if they would only use 100K tokens of it. Actually, you can see a pretty steep fall off after, I think it was even 1,000 tokens, even for the bigger models, because they start to catastrophically forget things. They start to have poorer performance in just the quality of the answers that they have. I don't know if you guys experience it also. If you, for example, code for a long time in the same session in Claude Code or Codex, at some point, what used to be like a fantastic code kind of sidekick becomes this really messy, unwieldy agent that is not doing what you asked for.
Yeah, but I used to have the same experience with junior programmers when I was pairing with them all day.
Fair enough. We're just overwhelmed.
Exactly.
We should have a vacation for the LLMs.
That's really funny. Yeah, so I'm curious on the topic of context engineering, which has become kind of like the new thing. Where do you see that growing within the Ruby LLM gem? Are you looking for opportunities to try and introduce some design concepts around context management? Or are you kind of like not even considering that and like just let people figure it out like everybody else?
Not at the moment, except for one thing, which is when we will introduce thinking, I'm already thinking, pun intended, to remove all of the thinking blocks, which I believe is what Codex does. So you see that it's quite context efficient. It doesn't go up as much as Claude Code does. But apart from that, I don't see... We could implement a lot of other things like compacting of the context. But at that point, we're essentially having a library of prompts. And I'm not sure if your LLM library should prescribe how these prompts should be. I think it should be your own kind of creativity and ingenuity in order to make these prompts as best as you can.
That leads me to my next question around like, how are you testing, how are you benchmarking the library? Like, is there any room there for like something new? Because I feel like that one thing we just had Vincent on from DSpy RB. And one thing I really like about that is it's like very like evaluation first. And I feel like a lot of that is missed, where we're at this like kind of like inflection point of creativity, like hitting its limits. We're kind of like finding the tasks that the things are doing well at. And so how are you testing that it's doing the tasks that you ask it to specifically do?
Yeah, evals are a big thing. They're going to become a big thing when I will release the eval framework that I'm thinking about. So Chat with Work is now at a point in which the UI works really well, the tools work really well, and I want to actually have a private alpha out with, a few selected people. But then after that, we really need to make sure that the responses that they get from their questions, they're actually really good. I know that Kieran has released Leva, but what I want to have is a framework that essentially, first of all, makes the concept of an agent in a class. So you already have progressive disclosure in Ruby LLM, right? Which you can then compact into an agent by one method. So you have rubylm.chat.ask with a system prompt and with tools and all of that, and you can call that an agent and put it in a method. I think it's nicer to have it in a class. It also makes people think more that, hey, this is an agentic. You can do agents with Ruby LLM, which I think some people don't realize. And then you can use these agents, which are essentially a collection of tools and instructions, in the eval framework. So this is kind of how I'm thinking about it. So there's a two-step thing. I think the agent class is going to be very, very easy to implement, and the agent framework probably not, but we'll see. This is how I'm going to benchmark it. But if you think about benchmarking it in terms of the quality of the library, or like where does it go next? Because I think there was also that part of the question. It's based on what I like. No, but to give you a better answer is essentially a combination of, so I don't want to make Ruby LLM a framework for a specific type of development in LLMs. I want it to be easy to use layer to communicate with LLMs in a way that it's at the right complexity level, right? It's at the right abstraction level. So it's not too shallow, like, for example, the OpenAI SDK or Alex's Ruby OpenAI, which is like, it's a layer on top of the APIs, or it's too complicated, a multi-agent framework would be, right? I want to be kind of the in-between, in which you can simply send like a message to an LLM, but you can also do something a lot more complicated in a very easy way. Again, it's like the simple should be simple, complex should be possible kind of way. So in my talk at Euruco and in the upcoming keynotes at SF Ruby, I have a slide in which in 20 lines, I can fit it in a slide. There is a 4-agent, multi-agent system in Ruby LLM for, I don't remember what it was. I think it was some summarization of something. I think it was, look at this code and give me like a security review and a code quality review and all of that. It was 20 lines of code. So if you can do that, I think I'm happy.
First, that's very exciting for the upcoming SF Ruby. And also, I think that it's the right philosophy for Ruby LLM to stay generic and be a library that can be used in many different ways. I still think that there probably is an opportunity there for exactly what you're talking about, at the top, which was, a library for context. But I don't actually think that should be Ruby LLM's job. I think that's probably another job. And I think DSpy kind of gets at it as a framework for building it. But I also think all of us developers are and probably should not be creative writers right now. And I think the sooner somebody comes along and says, no, this is actually the best way. These are the words you use when you're doing some generic task, the better it will be for everybody. We can get out of the creative writing game and back to really closer to the programming.
Yeah, I think this is the struggle of a developer approaching like machine learning. So I don't know if you guys use classical machine learning ever, but when I switched from essentially 2009, I learned Rails because I wanted to in university during my bachelor. And then a couple of years after, I was doing my master in AI and I was using Python. I was learning all these other things about machine learning. And it was such a shock going from the deterministic way of thinking of a developer, like if I do this, then this happens, to like, oh, I train a model and who knows what happens.
Right. Yeah.
And we'll have to do all these, vague testing, and you have these metrics that don't really like match the business goals. And oh my God, how do you combine them together? So I think this is a different version of that kind of feeling that we're having right now. But now we're interacting instead of with model that essentially you give some numbers and it spits some numbers out. It feels like it's a whole person that you're talking to, and it has a personality and a style and a way of thinking. So it feels a little bit different. I think we're never going to have like a deterministic way of doing that. And each single model has its own style and personality. I don't know if you guys can see the quotes.
Yeah.
And we should kind of approach it that way. And I think, of course, we all want to have like, oh, what is the best way of doing it? But I don't know if we're going to find it. You have to have it per model and do a lot of testing. And that sucks. But
yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, fair point.
The training data is so important for task selection, right? Yeah. So I feel like, yeah, I know. And you mentioned traditional machine learning, and like data quality is like the most important thing you could possibly imagine. And so if you're looking at an open source model, like that's all you're looking at is like what data was used to train this thing. I feel like that was an unlock for me, realizing that just there's so much quality data on a Hugging Face that you can just download that like is available. And I feel like once people realize like there's quality data out there and that you can use it even with like these less deterministic models to help course correct, I feel like there's a lot of open holes to fill in that kind of like crossover. Now that machine learning people are kind of like, I won't say losing jobs, but like transitioning to the LLM world, I feel like there's a lot of missing gaps of, well, how do we use those traditional methods to improve the determinism aspect, right, of these specific tasks? But yeah, I wanted to...
I've been in machine learning enough to say that there's no way to make it completely deterministic.
Oh, no way, right? But you can greatly improve the prediction accuracy, right? Just by like percentages, like order of magnitudes, like you can course correct for some tasks.
And
especially if you have the data.
Really evaluation, right? So this is also why evaluation is the clear next step for also Ruby LLM. Even in traditional machine learning, you would do so many tests before putting like a model in production. There's an entire field in business of weights and biases and ML flow and all of these frameworks to just do experiment tracking.
Right.
And the reason is that you do a lot of experiments. Yeah. The problem now is that, well, we can't train these models anymore because they cost millions of dollars to be trained, right? So what can you do? Well, you can do a little bit of fine tuning if you have a lot of data and you really want to have a specific style of responding. But is it going to be like game changing for you? Not sure. And also, it should not be used for learning new concepts necessarily. Instead, it's all about context engineering, right? So these are the two tunables that you have. And unfortunately, or fortunately, probably unfortunately, all these models, they are different, right? So for each model, you need to have a slightly different prompt that would work just as well as the other ones, right? So if you have a certain benchmark that you need to hit in terms of precision, then you need to have different prompts and different tools and different description of these tools. And all of the things that you pass to the model needs to be a little bit different in order to maximize their usage.
Yeah, totally. And that's another thing you can see on Hugging Face too, is you explore a model and it tells you like how to use it, right? It's like their model card, which I feel like people just like don't even look at anymore, right? Because like they're either using Anthropic or they're using OpenAI. For the most part. But yeah, I mean, there's other options out there. I'm excited to see the smaller models kind of take over as an aggregate. I don't know if we'll see that anytime soon. I am super interested in this topic, but I want to leave time for your whole, I guess, bit on why async in Ruby is just like a fantastic leveraging point for your library, but more importantly for Ruby's position in AI. Because I feel like you were so spot on in your article on the future of AI apps with Ruby. And so what's like the high level 10,000 foot view of like where you kind of see like, because you mentioned the async framework. as being a great positional point. With Tenderlove's, Aaron Patterson's talk recently, he was talking about reactors providing like that full parallelism. Where do you see this kind of growth opportunity, and like what should people be focusing on when they're using their AI systems?
Right. So 10,000 foot view is if you're doing IO bound operations, you should use async in Ruby. If you're doing CPU bound operation, you should use reactors. You can use threads too. That's fine, but they come with overhead. So why would you do that?
Right.
That's it. That's pretty much my bit. No, so I can give you a little bit more context. So threads are really used a lot in Ruby, and the background job processors, they use a concept of like the maximum amount of workers. And why do they do that? Because threads also consume a little bit more memory, consume a little bit more RAM, especially like virtual memory, actually a lot more virtual memory. I think it's 8 megabytes per thread of virtual memory, and it's 32 kilobytes or 4 kilobytes. It's in my article somewhere of memory. So substantially different. In RAM, it's a lot different. Like you don't consume that much RAM, so it's kind of equal. That's fine. But the context switching is a lot, I think it's 20 times more expensive. So long story short, you need to use Mac threads. Otherwise, you're going to blow up the virtual memory budget, or you're going to have way too many context switches, and then your machine slows down to a crawl. With async, you run everything in a single thread. And essentially, it's cooperative concurrency, which means that each single fiber would have to yield to the other fibers, but they yield automatically at I/O operations. So you don't have to do kind of anything unless you're doing something really specific. So what it means is that it's possible now to create, and in fact, Samuel Williams, which is the creator of the whole async ecosystem, has created also a active job adapter for a sync job. And now you don't need to have a maximum number of fibers in there, which means that you can run a lot more concurrent LLM or any IO bound operations at the same time. So that's where the one machine part of the one API, one person, one machine comes in. You can run thousands and thousands of concurrent operations and LLMs conversations at the same time, because otherwise you would block one single worker for each single LLM conversation that you're having. And these LLM conversations that you're having, they can take 60 seconds, 5 minutes, God knows. Like if you put the thinking budget too high, probably, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Probably will time out. So take care of your timeouts. But then you're having one slot occupied for that specific conversation, and then you have one less slot. And you shouldn't have like an enormous amount of threads, even in solid queue or in all of these other wonderful, but also not LLM optimized background job processors.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I guess, how do you think about the scale of things? Like, do you find yourself needing to group certain tasks that you know take longer than others in certain queues? Do you do any of that kind of planning, or do you just like throw things in the active job and like let it figure itself out?
No, there's no prioritization or anything. At the moment, there's one single queue in the chat with work. And the reason is that I moved away from another way of doing this. You know, if you don't know chat with work, maybe your audience doesn't. It's basically an agent that communicates with your Google Drive and Notion and Slack and GitHub and stuff. For the moment, it's only Google Drive. And in the past, I used to be like a normal RAG system. So I would synchronize all your files and index them and have like embeddings and vector search and all of that. And that required two queues, because you have like the queue of like fetching stuff and the queue of like the conversations. But right now it's actually much more similar to Cloud Code. That's why I call it Cloud Code for your documents, because it's essentially having like a grep and a search tool and a read tool and an update tool. And so it doesn't need to like fetch your whole data set in the background. So it doesn't really clog my queues too much or at all. This is specific maybe to my use case, but you should probably
from
use
what I've seen,
if you have different use cases.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that read, update, like kind of the CRUD actions of Claude Code style. I feel like I've seen that growing in the Ruby Discord channel, at least. That style of, I won't even call it agentic coding, but
it's the style. It's doing CRUD updates or doing CRUD with AI. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much just giving it a Rails app to use. You know.
Yeah, it turns out we're all CRUD monkeys, even LLMs.
Right. LLMs, yeah.
Yeah. What is something that, this is another question from one of my developers, on the topic of chat with work, where have you found Ruby LLM to be specifically very good at solving technical tasks? And where have you seen it actually maybe come up short?
Well, it's been developed within chat with work, so it's pretty good at what.
So it's always perfect for the task. Yeah, that's good. That's an advantage.
What's very good at, I think it's, I don't know, the thing that I enjoy the most is the Rails integration, just because it has the exact same API specification as the plain old Ruby objects kind of API. I don't need to think so much when I'm coding, a new prompt or I have another agent or something like that. It's very easy. It's just like chat.create, and then you have the same exact parameters that you can pass to rubylm.chat, and then .ask is the same. So that part I enjoy a lot. Decluttering my brain from bullshit. That's the thing that I like a lot. Because I think we need to focus more on the context engineering and prompt engineering and all of these tasks, which are, really important to make our products better, instead of thinking about what is the response format of this specific provider in a specific thing that I do, like streaming, for example.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear.
Falling short, I don't really have any good options. Is there anything that you guys think it's falling short?
I don't have anything here. If I did, I would tell you, but I don't. I think we're very happy to be using it.
Just the responses API.
The responses API?
Not there yet. It's not there yet.
Yeah, I know.
I also don't find too much of a reason to have a responses API too soon, because it seems to me that we're going to lose audio support by switching to that, which is really strange. And the only thing that we will gain is like O4, I believe, and a couple of other models that are responses API only. But so far, OpenAI has actually provided backwards compatibility through chat completions API to pretty much everything. It's going to come at some point. Don't worry. I see you disappointed.
The biggest thing to me is the reasoning boosts that you can get out of, especially in the world where there's compliance risk and you need to like take advantage of their encrypted reasoning tokens to feed back into itself. There's just some optimizations that they have built in now that you just see.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah, much
actually the number.
Yeah. There's a lot of great stuff kind of just like built into the new APIs that give you advantages for specific things.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to. But
yeah, put it in the issue.
I'll open an issue. Yeah. Then I'll be like, hey, look what you're missing, Carmine. I'm just messing around. You could still use the chat completions API for most of it. So,
that's kind of the point. But we will get there. Maybe soon.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm definitely in the advanced category, so I'm already taking advantage of like a lot of the reasoning models and the thinking and doing things maybe that it's not even ready to do in a lot of ways, hoping that the bitter lesson catches up with me and I could just delete half my code base. But slow and steady.
It's fantastic. It's not so bitter when you think of it that way.
Yeah, right. Except it will just keep generating. So by the time I've deleted half of it, it's generated another half. So
that's true.
Net new. Well, we've been talking about a lot here, Carmine. Thank you so much for coming on and for creating this fantastically designed Ruby gem. I know a lot of Rubyists out there are just kind of over the moon with it for good reason. It follows all the things that, we want out of a library. So
yeah, and tack on to that. And it also follows all the things that we know and love about the Ruby community, which is, somebody like yourself building this. And yeah, I get that it solved the problem for you, but you kept building it, kept releasing it out in the open, and it's grown to be this thing that so many people love. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for that and for you.
It's really nice to hear that.
Keep it up. I'm going to keep following along and using it more and more. I've only just started. I have this habit, or bad habit, good habit, I don't know, a habit of repurposing. We have this little like podcast admin Rails app that like does our intake and prepares for episode launches. And I swap out the thing that runs it every time we have a new guest on that has some gem. It was on DSpy, now it's on Ruby LLM.
Awesome.
Just kind of like a personal experiment, but it's pretty painless, straightforward. Like all the components just swap right out. So yeah, I think it speaks volumes to your library. Just like very well designed.
Thank you, guys.
So anyway, if people want to reach out to you, find out what you're up to, like what channels should they be looking at?
I post on X quite frequently, so I guess that's one of the channels, probably the main one. It's at Paolino, Paolino. Also, my GitHub is like at CRMNE, which is Carmine without the vowels except the last one for some reason. And then my website is paolino.me. So that's where you can find perhaps like longer blog posts and stuff.
Yeah, definitely check that out. There's some really good stuff on there.
We'll link that to the show notes and make sure that people can follow along all this async stuff, because to me, that's the most fascinating part of this. Is it just drops right in. Yeah. Awesome.
Maybe tomorrow. We'll see.
Hey, all right.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, it was really a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Yep. Fantastic. If there's anything you want to share, last, we have this little short segment at the end, things you want to point people to, if you want to.
No, just go make Ruby AI a big thing. I think we have the tools. I don't think we should be shy anymore of actually using AI, because AI has changed, right? AI is not building models anymore. AI is building apps. And who are the best people to build apps? I think it's Ruby on Rails developers.
I agree. We're not biased at all.
At all.
I mean, I think the fact that there's two people here that have successful businesses that they're operating in this space. And, you know, I work for a very large one myself at Gusto. So like, who cares if it scales or not, right? I think we've all proven that it does, but at this point, it makes money. So
it does. And there's room for everybody. Yeah,
right.
That's absolutely true.
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Hope to see you guys at SF Ruby. If not, it's been a pleasure.
Yep. Yeah, it was great, Carmine. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.